Mandela Day will not be a holiday, but a day devoted to service.
Nelson Mandela means a whole lot to people.
Selflessness. It's about time we rise up.
Nelson Mandela Day, I'm working with an NGO from my community.
So on Nelson Mandela Day, I'll be at the soup kitchen where I work.
Go help in a homeless shelter. That'd be nice.
It is our hope that people will dedicate their time and effort to improve the conditions within their own community.
Madiba started the change. Now it's time to play your part. Take action. Inspire change. Make every day Mandela Day.
Well, firstly, he was absolutely as handsome as we all thought he was, and absolutely as commanding in his presence. And not because he was bombastic, but he just has an aura that commands respect. But I must say, the thing that struck me most about him, and which still strikes me today, is just his thoughtfulness and his compassion. My dad was dying of cancer. I was obviously very, very affected and fragile about it. He just arrived at the hospital at my dad's bedside as someone who cared about someone who was dying. It just made my dad's day. My dad passed away shortly after that. When Madiba came back, he didn't even tell me he'd been. I know it was a very busy time. We were in the middle of the Constitutional Assembly. The fact that Tata made time to go and see someone he didn't know, and someone who was just a very ordinary poor man in a public hospital in Grooteskië dying of cancer. Just the way he held me during that time, he's just a remarkable man who I think I try to learn a lot from in terms of how your importance and your position and your status, you should never ever let it go to your head and forget just what pain means for ordinary people.
What else have you learned from him that has touched your life and affected you and affected your outlook?
I think one other thing which we all need to remember about Tata is just how to live with what Sizanele Mbeki calls a sense of enoughness. Tata to this day still has never gone for crass wealth or showiness or material vulgarity. And there's too much of that around amongst us, including some of us in leadership today, and especially for the youth. I get very disturbed when young people in our country go for vulgar displays of opulence. In a country where there is so much poverty and need, it is just outrageous. And I hope that we will go back to actually look at how Tata has lived his life when he came out of prison, when everybody was ready to offer him every piece of vulgar wealth. And he turned his back on that because he remembered that we represent poor people and that we just have to live with that culture of enoughness. In seeking to redress that, we actually have to also lead by example in terms of trying to build a country where inequality is unacceptable. I really try to also do that, which is why in my company, Peotona Group Holdings, we have put aside in every one of our transactions around 70% of every rand we make, we plow back into ring-fence community trusts that we can't change our minds about ever. Hopefully in that way we try to also do our bit.
You've worked with Madiba in various capacities, primarily political. You speak about being in the UDF, you were involved in the initial negotiations with the old National Party, and then you worked in a key leadership position in the ANC before Madiba appointed you as High Commissioner to the UK. What was that like, working in that political context with him?
I was very fortunate because I had the huge privilege to work with the triplets. Some people call them the terrible triplets, and some of us call them the tender triplets, and that's Nelson Mandela, Oliver Tambo, and Walter Sisulu. Learning at their feet was just remarkable, and I think very few people, even in the leadership, had the opportunity to work closely with the three of them, and to just experience their love. And for me to see three powerful leaders, and men especially, I think, are very bad at working with other powerful men, and especially with women. And just to see how they managed to work in the most respectful way. They were very different people. but they managed to use that difference in leadership style, in personal strengths, to be complementary. Never ever any backstabbing, never any backward dealings with each other, straight up and down to one another's face. And that was just wonderful. And then also just seeing how much they laughed. And it's something which Tata Madiba, Uncle Walter, and Tata Oliver Tambo, all three of them, just that humanity that they managed to retain, the ability to have a wicked sense of humor, to always look on the bright and the funny side of difficult situations, which is qualities that I think one does need in a country like ours that will continue to be tough for a long time, because our journey towards freedom is far from over. And if we don't have a sense of humor and a sense of understanding that it's about the people that we serve through these corporates or through these public entities, and that, turning those ships around is going to require firmness, but a sense of humor from time to time, because we're dealing with people whose behavior we're trying to change. And I think the terrible triplets really taught me a great deal about that.
What really stands out for you as the Mandela or Madiba legacy?
Difficult one, Angie, for a man whose legacy will loom large with us long after he's gone. I would say that Nelson Mandela's biggest legacy for me is that good leaders lead from the front and they lead with compassion. What
is Cheryl Carolus's all-time favorite Madiba moment?
I remember one very frosty morning in Scotland in a beautiful castle when I was still the High Commissioner and Tata was still the President, and he was saying goodbye to the world. And we were having breakfast together and looking at what we needed to push whilst he was saying goodbye with the heads of the EU who were all meeting in Scotland. And somehow, I don't know for what good reason, Tata decided to raise the question of boxing, which I am utterly opposed to. I think it's barbaric. And he decides to start convincing me and then starts chastising me about my ill-informed views about boxing. It was one of those crazy things where before you've had anything to eat, it's not wise to start with something that you differ with fundamentally with each other. So our blood sugar levels were probably quite low, and we both got into this standoff argument about the barbarism, and him saying to me, it's all about science and strategy. At dinner that evening, we firstly laughed about how stupid it was, and that's what was great about Tata, but we also agreed that we will never, ever, ever try to convince one another of our views on boxing in future. And it was just such a lovely moment for me when I think about it.